This is our 7-year-old's workbench in its natural state, but now his sister wants a workbench too, so time to build another one to go right here. And the top will be this piece of headboard that I thought was solid wood, but it turns out it's mostly particle board, but that means it's none too good for this job. And the front edge will be this piece of maple that I milled out of a log a couple of years ago. This will be the front edge, nice and solid for hammering on. This will be a back edge, and in both of those I'll cut a shallow rabbet along here for that piece of headboard to fit in between. And as usual, cutting that rabbet is 2 cuts on the table saw because I can't be bothered to set up a dado blade. This is how it fits in on the front. For the back, I have to go way back here because I'd like to get about this much depth, which means I'll need to fill this in later. An imperfect fit. And then a few adjustments with the belt sander to make that fit. Well, actually, more than just a few. And now with a reduced level of imperfections. And now I need a jig for drilling some dowel holes precisely. And I'm using my homemade milling drilling machine to make that. I'm just using the cranks to position things, but that's enough to accurately space the holes and also have them in the right lateral position. And I slightly messed up the ends of some of the holes while drilling them all the way through, but I think this jig will still do. So this is now my little window for lining up my hole with a mark on the board. Well, not entirely perfect, but about as good as I'd hoped it would fit. Now for putting the piece in on the other side, I couldn't easily put it on the bandsaw because I had all the weight of the clamps on the other side. So for this one I just decided to make the cutout on the table saw. And with both cuts being made on the table saw, it was much easier to match the imperfections so it fit together. And before joining the front and back rails to the particle board top, I'm cutting some slot mortises in either end. I'll need those later. And I use my dowel jig again for drilling lots of little dowel holes to join the front rail to the panel. And oops, it turns out I forgot to drill 2 of the holes in the front rail, so I had to pull out some of the dowels to make it fit. This is the bottom of the bench, and to reinforce this edge, I'm going to put this on here, and that's joined with floating tenons on either end, like this. And that needs to go on before I glue this part in here, because otherwise there's no way to get it in there. And now drilling 5mm dowel holes in the back rail to join it on the same way as the front rail. this workbench top is getting surprisingly heavy already. And now transferring over the lateral positions of my dowel groups, which I then drilled in, and now joining it up. And with 18 dowels and 2 mortises coming together, it's always one of those things where it's stressful and I have to work really fast. And I figure I might as well glue the scraps of particle board that I cut off the main piece onto the bottom just to reinforce that, because kids woodworking always involves a great deal of hammering. Next, cutting the legs out of 2x6 materials, and I have 2 of those paired together to minimize the amount of scrap. And now slot mortise in each legs, plus slot mortises in the piece that joins them together. This will give the legs front to back stability. Ah, shit. And that one fit more tight than optimal. And this one also fit on there much too tight, but the slow and steady pressure of a clamp is actually much better at closing a joint. And I sanded down the rest of the floating tenons a bit, which made for a much easier assembly. Also better for strength because you don't end up scraping most of the glue out of the joint while assembling it. And now making some little hardwood blocks for screwing the leg assemblies onto the bottom of the workbench. And we're getting close to done. Time to trim the ends of the workbench top. Fortunately, that bit still barely goes on my table saw sled. And I wasn't planning on refinishing that piece of particle board, but it turns out it's shellac, and the great thing about shellac is it's really easy to get off. And this is how the leg assembly is attached to the workbench top. Basically, they just have a wide flange that gets screwed onto the bottom, and the top is rigid enough that I don't need any apron rails like I would on a table. And I first used that technique earlier this year when I built the kids' craft table. In fact, I titled that video "A Different Way to Attach Table Legs." And I put varnish on it because I don't want wood glue sticking to it, and it turned out way nicer than I set out to make it. I'll hate to see it get all scratched and banged up, but it is a workbench. And now the workbench is in place. The kids have been begging to use the scroll saw again, so I just mounted it on the kids' workbench, and I'll be curious to see how well they'll end up sharing this space.